On a crisp October morning in 1989, just outside the battered, bullet-riddled headquarters of Panama's defense forces, known as Gen Manuel Noriega's comandancia, chaos was the order of the day. A woman stood beyond the railings, taken over by grief from the death of her husband during the attack. This was just another day in the life of Manuel Noriega, a man who was hero to some, villain to others. What he truly was, you can decide for yourself at the end of his story. Guarding the comandancia were the menacing enforcers of Noriega's notorious Dignity Battalions, armed to the teeth. In the background, a crowd of Noriega's supporters raucously cheered and hurled insults at George H.W. Bush, the U.S. president. Suddenly, like an anime character, Noriega himself emerged from the building, clad in combat gear, a red baseball cap perched on his head, and a grin that could send shivers down your spine. Journalists clamored through the railings, desperately seeking answers. Who did this? Who's behind this audacious attempt at overthrowing the regime? They shouted. Noriega, never one to hold back, retorted in Spanish, "The Americans did this. The piranhas did this. They want to finish Panama." With that, he hurried back inside, as if the Yankees were hot on his trail. Chapter 1. A Heartfelt Beginning. Noriega's story began in the heart of Panama City, born to Ricardo Noriega, an accountant, and his mother Maria Feliz Moreno, who tragically succumbed to tuberculosis when he was just 5. Raised in the gritty terraplén slums by a woman he affectionately called Mama Luisa, Noriega's future looked far from glorious. Yet, despite the odds, he found himself at the prestigious Instituto Nacional for high school. His dreams of becoming a psychologist sparkled on the horizon, but his path took a different turn. A scholarship orchestrated by his half-brother landed him at the Chorrillo Military Academy in Lima, Peru. Funny thing was, they had to bend the rules a little bit, fudging his age on the paperwork on the way to Noriega, graduating with a degree in military engineering in 1962. During his time in Lima, Noriega had found an unexpected side gig. He became a CIA informant.
So what's it got to do with me, Mr. Rosnard? I'm just a tailor.
He's a spy of his own.
This peculiar arrangement persisted for years. Back home in Panama, he climbed the ranks, wearing the lieutenant's uniform in the National Guard.
Welcome to the jungle!
Chapter 2. A Ruthless Ascension. His reputation as a tough guy and an alleged sexual predator grew.
Make sure you break his neck.
But his usefulness to U.S. intelligence was undeniable. He even clocked some hours at the infamous School for Dictators, the U.S.-funded school of the Americas, right in Panama. Noriega's life was closely entwined with another Panamanian strongman, Omar Torrijos, a fellow School of the Americas graduate. Despite Noriega's rowdy behavior and disturbing accusations of rape,
Want to hang out with me?
Torrijos kept him in his corner. In fact, Torrijos affectionately referred to him as "my gangster."
On Hellfire, there is no choice.
Together, they went after rivals with precision, though they never plunged into the abyss of mass killings and disappearances favored by some of their Latin American counterparts like Augusto Pinochet. By the late 1960s, Noriega had found love and cleaned up his act. He met his wife, Felicidad Cieiro, and his newfound discipline propelled him up the military ladder. During Torrijos' reign, he assumed control of Panamanian intelligence, mainly by collecting dirt on politicians and judges and wielding it like a weapon. By 1981, he was pocketing $200,000 annually from the CIA for his intelligence services. However, when Torrijos met an untimely demise in a plane crash in 1981, Panama had no playbook for transferring power. Amid a power struggle among military leaders, Noriega emerged as the head of the National Guard and de facto ruler of Panama. Flashback to 1984, a year when the political stage in Panama was more chaotic than a telenovela plot twist. Manuel Noriega, the man pulling the strings, decided to give democracy a whirl and allowed presidential elections. But here's the kicker. The results were about as authentic as Dan Bilzerian's fortune. It looked like he'd rigged the game in favor of his buddy Nicolas Ardito Barletta, a banker and economist from the Torrijos crew. At this point, everyone knew Noriega was the puppet master calling the shots. Back then, Noriega was like the USA's best buddy, with full American support. Why, you ask?
I am for free press, fair elections, and equal rights for women. I can't say that.
Well, when the Reagan administration started their covert anti-communism mission, Noriega was their go-to guy. With him in power, Panama became the best place to be for all sorts of shady dealings. Weapons, money, and top-secret info. It was like a one-stop shop for all things covert. And guess what? Panama's canal, its handy maritime flag for sketchy business, and its offshore banking system made it a dream hub for everyone from Cubans to Israelis, Libyans to Russians, and a parade of Marxist guerrilla groups. Noriega earned quite the rep for playing nice with everyone. Rumors even started swirling that he had his fingers dipped in the drug trade, supposedly in cahoots with none other than Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel.
What you want? I got ketamine, meth, MDMA, Adderall, Bromo Dragonfly, heroin, coke.
When the big question about his involvement with Escobar popped up, he made the classic politician move, denying the worst parts and admitting to the lesser evils.
No, I literally can't hear you.
I'm going to another question.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Sure, he said he allowed those Colombian narco-traffickers to launder their dirty money in Panama's banks, but only because the Americans asked him to. Chapter 3, On Knife's Edge. Then, in 1985, a problem would enter with Hugo Spadafora, the Panamanian revolutionary fresh out of the Nicaraguan jungle. He was a real-life action hero, a former doctor, and had a dash of James Bond charm. Spadafora had fought guerrillas against colonial Portuguese in Africa, and then joined the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. One day in Costa Rica, a reporter named John Lee Anderson had a face-off with Spadafora in a hotel room. Spadafora spent hours trying to convince Anderson that Noriega was a full-fledged criminal and drug smuggler who needed to be ousted. Not long after that conversation, as Spadafora headed back to Panama, 2 National Guardsmen pulled him off a bus. They led him away and, in a gruesome act, sawed off his head with a knife. Noriega, of course, denied any involvement in the murder, but no one was buying it. Spadafora's brutal death was a game-changer for Panama. People started protesting Noriega's rule, demanding justice. President Barletta, who promised to bring Spadafora's killers to justice, was swiftly removed by Noriega. The unrest only grew, and Noriega unleashed his Dignity Battalions, armed with clubs and machetes, on the protesters. He claimed it was a class war, pitting the poorer mestizos and blacks like himself against the upper-class rabiblancos, backed by the Americans. There was some truth to it, but Panama, under Noriega, was fast turning into a thugocracy. The U.S. had been pretty chill about Noriega's shady business, drug trafficking, gun smuggling, money laundering, because he was helping with their secret Contra campaign against the socialist Sandinistas next door in Nicaragua. But then, the New York Times dropped a bombshell expose about Noriega's criminal antics. revealing to the public that the U.S. knew all about it. At this point, the Reagan administration began seeing Noriega as more trouble than he was worth. By 1989, the U.S. pulled the plug on their support. No more military or economic aid, and they supposedly cut him off from the CIA payroll.
Tell you what, forget the money.
What?
Forget the money.
What do you mean, forget the money?
What am I doing? I'm talking to an empty telephone.
I don't understand.
Because there was a dead man on the other end of this fucking...
Tensions kept rising, and Noriega decided to give democracy another shot with elections. But when his chosen candidate got whooped, he threw a tantrum and canceled the results. To make matters worse, he allowed a mob to beat up the victors right in front of the world's cameras. Noriega wasn't holding back anymore, waving a machete and daring the Americans to take him on. Spoiler alert, they did. Chapter 4. Facing the Music. Fast forward 4 days. President George H.W. Bush, who had taken over from Reagan less than a year before, gave the green light for a U.S. military invasion of Panama.
Victory over drugs is our cause, a just cause. And with your help, we are going to win.
It wasn't a cakewalk. The fighting lasted for several days, and tragically, hundreds of Panamanians lost their lives in the crossfire. The heart-wrenching casualties included innocent civilians from the impoverished neighborhood of El Chorrillo, where Noriega had set up shop. The Americans came down with a heavy hand, leaving devastation in their wake. Noriega, once the big shot in charge, was now suddenly on the run. He sought refuge in the Vatican envoy's residence, bunkering down while American troops surrounded the place and blasted him with blaring heavy metal tunes. After a nerve-wracking 10 days, he finally threw in the towel. A photograph from that moment captures Noriega meekly holding up his identification card as they snapped his mugshot. The era had finally come to a close. As for the civilian toll from the U.S. invasion, it's still up for debate, but the numbers could potentially be in the thousands. Noriega's story took a legal twist after his capture. In April 1992, he got slapped with 8 counts of drug trafficking, earning himself a 40-year prison sentence. It was later trimmed down to 30 years. Oddly enough, during his trial, the defense team wasn't allowed to spill the beans about his cozy history with the CIA. Even behind bars, he lived the high life, spending his time in what was hilariously dubbed the Presidential Suite in Miami. He became eligible for parole after 17 years thanks to good behavior, but other countries were itching to indict him upon his release. After being sentenced in France and Panama for his crimes, an 81-year-old Noriega would issue a public apology to his fellow Panamanians for actions taken during his military rule in 2015, although he didn't exactly confess to specific crimes. And in a final chapter that has been a long time coming, Noriega underwent surgery for a brain tumor, suffering severe hemorrhaging, and was put in a medically induced coma. On May 29, 2017, Panamanian President Juan Carlos Varela delivered the news we'd all been expecting. Manuel Noriega was dead. If you like videos of this kind, make sure you subscribe to Rue Royal, where the secrets of the rich and infamous are revealed. See you next time.